we have none other than the head researcher on public finance, Mr. Wakumelo Mataa. How are you doing this morning? Good to have you on.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being here. I'm doing fine. Thank you. How are you doing?
Oh, we are
Could
right.
be better.
Economically, my personal economy. That's why I started off by saying my economy. Nobody's trying to steal $160,000 from me. I'll tell you that much, because I don't have it, mainly. That's the main reason my money's safe. It's because it's not there.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, in case you're wondering what CTPD stands for, that is the Center for Trade Policy and Development. So, CTPD is a think tank, right?
Yes. Basically, it's an economic think tank, a not-for-profit making-based organization that seeks to support the formulation of trade policies with an ultimate goal of contributing to the alleviation of poverty in the country.
Yeah. So it is basically pro-poor.
Exactly.
Well, at least you try to get pro-poor solutions pushed out there.
Yeah.
Now, this is very, very timely because, of course, the current administration saying that they are a pro-poor government. So I think you would be the perfect think tank to sort of break that down and maybe encourage or criticize some of those policies that, by their own manifesto, might not necessarily be pro-poor. So when it comes to that, we know that the main thing when it comes to the 2021 personal economy, things that affect you and me, has to do with the economic recovery plan. COVID hitting businesses, hitting the economy. The ERP, which I must say, I keep saying this, that I agree with about like 95% of it, right? I agree with about 95% of it. You put it at 80?
At 80.
I think it's fantastic. On paper.
95 on paper.
If properly implemented. But that's just my humble opinion. I would like to find out what you have to say with regards to the economic recovery plan, just as, you know, a guide, and also what you have to say about it practically.
Okay. So we can, I think, start from the theme of the program itself.
Sure.
So we're aware that the program was launched and will be implemented under the theme to restore growth and safeguard livelihoods through macroeconomic stability, economic diversification, and debt sustainability. Of course, this is in light of the fact that we have what we term as an elephant in the house in the name of public debt, which has impacted so heavily, so much on the implementation of economic measures that can actually turn around the economy. So the program really seeks to achieve this under 5 pillars, if you can just allow me to quickly go through them. Number 1 is to restore macroeconomic stability. Number 2 is to attain fiscal and debt sustainability. Number 3 is to restore growth and economic diversification. It also seeks to dismantle domestic arrears, and lastly, to safeguard social protection programs. Now, the economic recovery program, as it is, it's important to note that it's not the first document of its kind that we have prepared, that we've launched, that we've implemented as a country.
Okay.
It's actually a successor of a very similar document, which was called the Economic Stabilization and Growth Program, otherwise called the ESGP, or the Zambia Plus document, which was launched and implemented over the period 2017 to 2019. That document also had 5 pillars. And again, if you allow me to just quickly go through them.
Sure.
It sought to restore budget credibility. It sought to enhance domestic resource mobilization. It sought to improve economic and fiscal governance. It sought to ensure greater and economic stability, growth and job creation, and lastly, to scale up government social protection programs. Now, when we look at these 2 documents, what we notice is that, number 1, like you said, I agree with you. They are both very good documents on paper. Fantastic documents with very good strategies and reforms that were put in those 2 documents. Number 2, what you notice from the documents is that there is no radical shift in terms of the narrative from what we intended to achieve under the ESGP and what we intend to achieve under the ERP. So this, in terms of the narrative, broadly speaking, we're basically talking about the same things. The ESGP 2017 to 2019 was a homegrown document, as we called it, and it was a recovery document.
Right.
The ERP is a recovery document.
Right.
So basically, we're still talking about the same thing in terms of the general narrative.
Yeah.
So then that entails that our problem has not really been failure to come up with strategies and reforms that can turn around the economy. Our problems have largely revolved around failure to effectively implement that which we say we want to do.
Right.
That is why 3 years after the ESGP was launched, we launched another document that sought to revive the economy. The only difference between the Zambia Plus document and the ERP is that the macroeconomic context within which the ESGP was being prepared and implemented in 2017 to 2019 was perhaps much better than the macroeconomic context within which the ERP was prepared and launched in 2020. And there's always a temptation, especially if you're in government, to point at COVID-19 as the major reason for this.
But you were saying we had the solution before the tempest.
Exactly.
So we navigated into the storm already equipped with the answers.
Exactly. So you can clearly see that the problem here is basically implementation. And if we're to be more sincere with ourselves, we should agree. We shouldn't find it difficult to agree that the problems that we face, the economic problems that we face, were there even before COVID-19. COVID-19 only sort of exacerbated the situation.
Sure.
Yeah, and then so what we notice also is that the ERP is being implemented in a very sensitive environment. So 2021 is basically the first year of implementation for the program, but 2021 again happens to be an election year for our country, and so some of the things that the ERP intends to achieve may not sit well with government in a way. For example, one of the specific objectives of the ERP is to, like I said, attain fiscal and debt sustainability. That is going to require government to reduce on public expenditure.
Right.
Yes, and in an election year, I think there's both precedence and empirical evidence of the fact that there's always that temptation for the government
to go the other way,
to spend. Yeah, so
True.
we need to keep on raising these flags to government,
Right.
raising these conversations to remind government to commit to the effective implementation of this particular program and ensure the wind of the upcoming general elections do not affect the effective implementation of the program. But I think one last point to mention also is that one of the reasons we have not done so well at implementing this program is we come up with the programs, but we don't invest so much in coming up with effective monitoring and evaluation frameworks that will track the progress of the program and be able to raise the flag in case we're deviating from what we intended to achieve.
Yeah.
So it would be nice for the ERP, for instance, mid-year this year, this being the first year of implementation, for instance, to have some sort of a joint press statement or whatever it is from the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of National Development and Planning to sort of provide an update, a status update on what has been achieved, what are the challenges, are we deviating from the objectives or we're still within, and what can we do to come back.
Sure.
So basically that's what we think about this particular program.
Inflation, which has reached 21.5%. I feel it every time I buy toilet paper. That's the one that gets me, though.
And you know what? And actually, just yesterday I saw a post on social media. This gentleman was saying, and now it seems the entry fee into a grocery store is 500 kwacha to walk out with 3 items.
Yes, that is where we are. But look, once again, these are different macroeconomic times. So many factors that we have to face in our domestic situation as well. There's what has happened globally. There's the fact that we are in an election year. So all those things. What do you think is the best way for the country to manage inflation? And this is a year that we can see radical positive change in a lot of things, including evaluation and the like. That is what an election year usually breeds. It does bring about change in mentalities and the like. So this might be a positive thing. But when it comes to the inflation going up rather than down, I don't like that positive growth. Yeah. So how do we manage that?
Okay, so it's always nice to go back to the basics. And so we'll have to interrogate what are the factors that underpin the inflation rate, what really causes it in an economy like ours. So there are a lot of determinants of inflation, but broadly speaking, they can actually be categorized in 2 thematic areas, if I can call them that.
Okay.
So they're what we call cost push factors, and they're what we call demand pull factors. So the cost push factors are basically factors that raise the cost of production and doing business in the economy, which then impacts negatively on aggregate supply of goods and services within the economy. And as economists, we like to say, holding everything else constant, that means prices will go up. Secondly, the demand pull factors that I mentioned, these are factors that raise the demand for goods and services in the economy, which is not matched by a proportionate increase in the supply of those goods and services. So you're basically demanding more than you are producing as an economy, and the ultimate result is that prices
go
up. So what we've experienced largely over the recent past as a country is a combination of both. Usually it's good to experience only one at a time, because then it becomes easy to
sort of manage.
To sort of manage.
Yeah.
The way we manage inflation as a country, inflation is a baby of the Bank of Zambia, as you may know. So we have a committee in the Bank of Zambia which is actually sitting as we speak to deliberate on many issues. Paramount among those issues is the inflation rate, which is called the Monetary Policy Committee. And the tool that they use to control inflation is the policy rate, the Bank of Zambia policy rate. So what basically happens, just to quickly run through, is that when there's high inflation, the bank is expected to sort of raise the policy rate. That is expected to raise the lending rates in commercial banks, reduce the level of money supply, and combat demand pressures that will then reduce inflation. But then towards the end of 2020, on account of the devastating impacts, of course, economic impacts of COVID-19 on the economy, growth concerns sort of outweighed inflation worries for the Bank of Zambia. We saw the Bank of Zambia reducing the policy rate regardless of the level of inflation in the economy. The idea was to inject liquidity into the economy and help businesses as they came back from the lockdowns that were necessitated by COVID-19, of course.
Right.
Yeah, so that was quite imperative, and yeah, it was understood. Because of that, partly, inflation has sort of rapidly increased. Secondly, the kwacha. So there's a significant pass-through, what we call it, the pass-through from the depreciation of the exchange rate to the inflation rate through the cost of production, of course, under the cost push factors that we mentioned. So the kwacha has lost strength against major foreign currencies in the recent past, and that has impacted positively on the cost of production and doing business in the economy.
Right.
The cost of importing oil has gone high, which means the cost of energy in the country has also gone high, which feeds positively into the inflation rate. So, in the first wave of COVID-19, what we saw as a response strategy was going into lockdowns, businesses closing down and whatnot.
Right.
And it was understood for the Bank of Zambia to undertake an accommodative stance, which sought to reduce the policy rate. However, we've noted at the Center for Trade Policy and Development that in the second wave of COVID-19, there is a radical shift in the response strategy. Businesses are no longer closing down.
Right.
Rather, they're finding innovative ways of continuing to operate amidst the pandemic. So we don't expect economic activity to slow down as much as it did when the pandemic hit us first in 2020, number one. Number two, we also sense a wave of hope on the horizon, given that the IMF recently launched a document in which they are projecting some rebounding somewhat of the global economy by about 5.5%.
Right.
Yes. If we position
I think that's also based on just people coming up with innovative ways that you said.
Exactly.
Point.
Instead of going back to the usual
panic mode.
So we expect that to potentially underpin the improvement in domestic economic activity, which then means that the Bank of Zambia can sort of go back to its original mandate, which is basically price stability.
Yeah.
And we've recommended as the Center for Trade Policy and Development that in the current deliberations of the Bank of Zambia, it would be nice for them to be more concerned about the rising prices because we've seen that businesses have sort of, found ways of surviving amidst the pandemic.
All right.
Yeah.
All very interesting, but unfortunately we have to be, wait for it, economical with our time and wrap it up there. But this is not the last we're seeing of you. And of course, S24 will keep you updated with news from such experts and expert organizations such as CTPD. So very, very nice having you on, Mr. Maata, and we'll definitely keep monitoring you as S24.
Thank you so very much.